So we will use a cone for the demonstration. At this point, will you look at that and tell me how well we're getting? Can you see what I'm doing here? And
yeah, like
okay.
I can't see.
So this is the acetate. This is the 5 mil acetate, and I've done this without making any kind of lines on the board because I want you to just see how that works. What I've done is I've just put this over this and I've cut it, and I like to use the 5 mil acetate because it will crack and score. You can score it and then crack it, and then this is the easy tack. And I will use an airbrush to just spray, or to just use the air to dry it, because otherwise I'll get the little pieces of adhesive on that will attach itself to my illustration. Now this is illustration board. You can see how thick this is. And I have coated that with gesso. I like doing that because if I make a mistake and it's a catastrophic failure, I can just paint gesso on top of that and I'm good to go. I want this to be sticky but not too sticky, and I think I made it a little too sticky, but I'm taking extra time to dry. Now, I'm going to be intentionally a little rough with this so that I can make some mistakes so that we can learn from those mistakes, and I'll try and fix them. Okay. So I like to start with the object. Typically I will start with what's most important. And for me, it's the object. And I really, really like the way the acetate is so easy to use. Okay, it is a good habit to get used to shielding off everything. Just so that you can be careless, for lack of a better word, while you're spraying. So basically everything is covered. And I don't have to worry about that. I can just spray to my heart's content. So, because in my head I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to do this cone red. So I know in terms of value that I'm going to let my red take care of that aspect. And so I'm just thinking, okay, where's the shadow? So I'm going to just spray the shadow side. Okay, you'll notice how my hands are big and broad, and how some of you are kind of going, okay, there's just no way I'm ever going to even that out. So I'm going to use broad strokes. So how do I fix that? Oh, I did this in the wrong order. I already got my red paint in here. So I'm encouraging you to work opaquely. So that you can do this. Fortunately, this is going to be a little pink, so I'm not going to worry about it. So I'm just covering it up. That was a little thick, so I'm going to let it dry. And if I make a mistake over here, okay, that's too dark. Good, fine, it's too dark. I can lighten it up. So effectively, I fixed that other problem. So, okay, this is kind of funky here. I kind of lost it there and didn't keep the form as I would hope. So then I can go back in. Okay. So from there, I think, okay, light side, shadow side, that's probably a little too dark. So I'll lighten it again. And I'll add a little bit more, thank you. Okay, so that's basically, there's some form there. So now, since I wanted to give you the experience of doing this in color, this is a technique that is not unique to airbrushing. The old masters used to work in this same manner. They would do a black and white painting, and then they would glaze very thin coats of color on top of that. And then it no longer becomes black, it becomes a darker value of whatever you spray on top of it, or what I would spray on top of it. So essentially you're working the same way the old masters did by doing this. For the color, now I can tell my mask's leaking a little bit there. That tells me that my paint is a little too thin. Bad for me. So that tells me I need to apply it a little thinner. I'm just letting it dry. Or do a little bit thicker paint, or both. So I'm spraying a little bit down, letting it dry, spraying a little. And what I'm doing is I'm looking at this and thinking, okay, I'm keeping this in mind, so I want this corner over here to be a little darker. Now, in truth, this color is going to be not very vivid, because anything you mix with black is not going to be very vivid. Thinking ahead, once you learn a little bit more about color, let's just say if this was a face, rather than using black, you'd want to use a shadow skin tone. But for the sake of principle and the level you guys are at, let's just stick with black. So as you can see how that becomes a nice red tone. One of the things that I find the most difficult is when the paint kind of builds up. If you're spraying like this, your chances of it leaking are higher than on this side. But also if you allow the paint to be wet on your mask, sometimes that will blow off as well. So I'm just drying everything off here. Okay, so from time to time, if you guys remember my cardinal rule, it's always darker than I think it is. I'll check it and think, wow, that's really dark. And then you're surprised. So another cool thing is if it does get too dark, I'm just going to make sure my mask is thick again, or stuck down, sorry. I can think, okay, I don't really need to fix it, but I'm going to because I want you guys to see it. Okay, let's just say that's just too dang dark. So I can mix more white and think, okay, I need to lighten it. But in lightening it, you can see I've kind of dulled the color a little bit, which is okay. But I want to get some of that color back. So in fixing that, I think, okay, now I'll go back to red and do just enough to get my bright color back. Make sense? Okay, so now we'll do just the opposite. Okay, it's not a bad masking problem there, but it was leaking. Where's my other triangle? You guys see the other half of my...
Yeah, pull down.
Oh, not cool. Oh, cool. Now I've got a nice Adidas stamp on here. Darn, that's going to make it harder. I should have dried this off first. Well, I said we were going to fix screw-ups, and that was a screw-up that I never even expected. So we'll have to go back and fix that. Which is why I'm recommending we work opaquely. I lost some of my adhesive things in my footprint there. So, okay, now I will go in and do the shadow here. I will use a shield. If I need to get a little closer and have a little bit more control, which I do. Now, even though it doesn't show it in this cone, I'll show you this here. And for that, I don't want it to be a hard edge. So I'm not going to use a stencil that's got any stick to it. I'm just going to kind of have this come up a little bit, bending this up a little bit. So since that's not completely stuck down there, I'm going to spray it a little bit at a distance. Too bad. Okay, so I'm going to check myself and think, wow, was that dark enough? If I look at this, I'm thinking, wow, this needs to be a lot darker. But if you remember the technique I showed you last time of comparing it next to white, it's actually pretty close. But I like the air on the side is not doing enough, because it's a lot easier to put it down than it is to take it off. Okay, so now let's get back and see if I can fix that screw up. Now what I might want to do is, if you guys have noticed, when you put two stencils right next to each other, you've got this really laser hard line. I hate that personally, and it's really unnatural. So what I might do to fix this is I'm going to offset this stencil just ever so slightly. Now, if I put down as much paint as I did before, I'm just creating another hard line that's not going to look any different. It's just going to be in a different place, if that makes sense. So I'm going to just do a little bit. Now, if you can see, that creates a little softer edge, which I like. I should have had a little bit thicker paint. And made sure it was dry. Ideally, I would hope you guys would be a little bit more patient with yourselves. So now I'm going to do the same thing over on this side. I'm going to adjust that stencil a little bit, and I'm going to let this dry. That's not quite as much as I would like, so I'm going to adjust it even a hair further. And use even just barely spray on that one. Let's try that again. Now, because I have to fix this, I'm going to go ahead and spray red. I'm using my hand to hold down the mask. Okay, if I were really picky, I could see some differences in there. If I wanted it to be perfect, I would probably spray white again and then just redo it. But actually, that's pretty darn close right there as far as fixed. So now, I think I'm going to do that on all of the edges, because I really don't like an edge that is that harsh. It's just so unnatural. If you'll notice, my habit, I'm not even thinking about it. Before I even spray, I always come down here, because that way you don't get those spots that all of you are getting at this point. So I did it once, just slightly different. Now I'm going to adjust the stencil even more. Now I need to dry my stencil a little bit. You might look at it and think, wow, I'm not putting down any paint at all. But as soon as you lift up your stencil. Now can you see how this just has a nicer line than how abusively sharp that is? This is just levels of professionalism that makes a difference. It's going to make double sure everything's dry. I'm going to go hit this other. I'm not going to say you have to do this for this assignment, but it's really cool if you do. And it's good to learn and to know. Now, particularly with the cube, if you notice the edges of the cube assignment, they're not exactly butted up. The stencils aren't. You've noticed that? This is how you'd accomplish that, by just shifting your stencils. Just ever so slightly. Sometimes I would make that part of the technique would be to have a different color on the edge. You know, for example, if I sprayed green right there, at a distance you wouldn't really notice it, but it creates kind of a buzz with your eye that can be really cool. Okay, so basically we've got the form there. And I am just going to let this dry. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back So you've got light side, a little bit of highlight, shadow side. So now I will go back and I'll add the highlight. Now if you'll notice on the cone, there's a little bit of shifting of the stencil on the bottom there. So I'm going to do that to this. You think your airbrush is clean until you need to spray white, and then you realize it's not. I'm constantly sticking my finger in it to back up the paint. Since it's a highlight and I want it to be completely covered, I'm going to have the paint be a little thicker. Oh, I think I'll have it even a little thicker than that. Since I know I want this bottom edge to be just ever so soft, spray really light. Since I don't want a hard edge, I'm lifting this up a little bit. It's a little too light, so I'm going to go back with a little bit of red, but I also want to make my core a little darker. So I'm using black now. Once you go white, you can put your color back over it again. If I were doing this for myself, I would definitely be a little bit more particular, but I really wanted you guys to see how you can keep going back and forth. Particularly if you want bright colors, it's nice to have that last little bit of saturation at the end. I want to be a little picky here, so. Since I don't want to get under that edge, I'm going to adjust the stencil just ever so slightly. What that means, I've got to be careful here on the other side. That's not thick enough. it doesn't look too bad, but you probably can't see, but some of the white on the corner there, or on the edge of that. Ooh. So go back and just soften this edge ever so slightly. You're observing how little paint I'm putting down when I'm doing this. That doesn't look too bad. I think I probably might go back and pop that highlight a little bit. And I think I will. Now, if I wanted to add color to the background or the shadow, I could certainly do that very easily. Because you can change color without changing value. Because at least you've got the value established now. And if you would think, well, I want this to be really exciting, so maybe I could add a touch of green to the shadow, or a blue if you want it to be cool. But this is going to be pretty simple. That's why guys have white gloves on. Now, I'm being picky now, but I'd like to reinforce the core and lighten the reflected light. So I'm actually going to mix a kind of a pinkish here. I don't want it to leak. I want it to be perfectly straight. The beauty of stencils is you don't have to worry about the paint getting where you don't want. Yeah. That's perfect. Make sense? Go ye and do likewise. I hope that's helpful.